When we talk about vulnerability, especially as writers, that is the writer's voice, is to be able to step right into our fear, step right into our vulnerability.
Mm.
And I think that's where we find our true voice when we are not hiding anything.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Authors on Mission podcast. I'm going to start off with a question for you today. What if I told you that the secrets to enlightenment might be found not on a mountaintop or a monastery, but behind a drum kit surrounded by screaming fans and the thunder of rock and roll music? Well, our guest today is Clementine Moss, the founder and powerhouse drummer of Zepparella, a legendary all-female Led Zeppelin tribute band. But her story goes far beyond the stage lights and applause. She's also a spiritual counselor, a 30-year meditation practitioner, and the author of a memoir that will completely change how you think about what a spiritual life can look like. We're going to be talking about her book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer. So buckle up because we're about to explore how drumsticks can become prayer beads and how John Bonham's legendary swing contains spiritual secrets and why the loudest music might just lead to the deepest silence. Clementine, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you for having me.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Of course, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think it's so cool that you not only are in a rock band, but have been helping so many people with the power of your words through this book. So it's going to be a great show. I think it's important, though, that we start off with a little bit of a backstory here. How on earth did you decide to make this transition from rock and roll to spiritual life? What was the catalyst behind that?
Yeah. Well, the transition from, I started out thinking I was a writer, right?
Mm.
And went to school for writing and kind of had set all of my eggs in that basket. And then in my 20s, found drumming, which was kind of a strange transition there. And then around the time that I found drumming, I also started really going to meditation retreats and found contemplative practice as a big part of my life. And so my drumming career and my meditation career kind of started at the same time. So as time went on, and as I had a career as a drummer and then had spent all of this time on the meditation mat, at one point, everything kind of coalesced, and I realized, oh, this is actually something that I can do to help other people as well as myself, and kind of talk about a lot of the benefits that I had found, even in this noisy rock and roll life, the benefits I had found of contemplative practice.
Understood. So I got that a little backwards. I thought it was like the rock and roll first and spiritual next, but it kind of all seems to have come around the same time, which is really cool because it sounds like you developed your skills in each of those areas consecutively. I guess that's the right word, right? Like at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it was funny because I thought that they were so separate. It's like
Mm.
when I'm not on the road or I'm not, playing music, then I have this kind of quiet aspect of my life. And it was kind of like I had this, split down the middle. But as we get older, we realize how much all of these pieces of ourself are just the big picture, the big part of ourself. And I realized how integral each part of these seemingly different parts of myself really work together.
Right, understood. One question I was going to ask you is how you balance those, seemingly different worlds. I mean, you're constantly touring with Zapparella while simultaneously maintaining your spiritual counseling practice, but from what you just told me, it sounds like it just coexists pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, when I studied years ago, several years ago, I studied a form of counseling, spiritual counseling called depth hypnosis, and when I became a practitioner of depth hypnosis, then I began to really formally be a meditation teacher and a counselor, a spiritual counselor, with clients. And when I was studying for that, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, am I shifting completely out of playing music to this other world? And then as I went along and as I went through the studies of the spiritual counseling, it was kind of like, I guess this probably happens when people become therapists too, that you do so much personal work to become a good therapist that at the end of the day, you get closer to who you are for yourself and uh, as yourself. So at the end of me becoming like, I became a practitioner and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to have so many clients a week and, I won't have that much time for music. But as I did all of this internal personal work to be a good spiritual counselor, I realized how much the creative output was fundamental to myself. And I had this huge creative output at the end of becoming a spiritual counselor. And I realized, okay, well, I'm still this creative being, and that's kind of the primary focus of me. And then in the time that I have, I'll have, a handful of clients all the time that I can kind of manage both. So that's the way it happened for me. It was a surprise to me that that would happen that way.
Yeah, certainly surprising, but it sounds like they fuel each other. The creative energy flowing back and forth definitely just kind of helps both methods, I think. So really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of transitioning into the book, then I'm sure that was also part of the creative energy that was fueled from all of that. I'm curious. First off, what made you decide to start putting your journey into a book? I know you said you always wanted to be a writer. Is it something you had planned for a long time?
Yeah, when so I went to school for writing, and then I moved to New York City when I was 21 years old, and I didn't really have a plan. I just thought, okay, I need to be in the place where some of my favorite writers had been, and now it's time for me to just write and live. And at a certain point in my mid 20s, I realized that I felt like I didn't have anything to write about, that I hadn't lived. And that was when I started looking around for another form of creativity that I could do that involved other people. Or, when music presented itself, I thought, oh, this is perfect. I can travel, I can learn something new about myself by learning this instrument, I can have these different experiences. And I put writing aside uh, because I had the sense that I was going to throw myself into music and writing would come back to me at some point. I just knew that at some point I would want to write again. And sure enough, it actually started with writing songs. Songs started to come after about probably after a while of playing in bands, I started writing songs. And then from there, I started to write about my experience as a musician on the road and as a meditator. I started a blog where I started writing about, I go away for the weekend and all of the challenges of the weekend that happen when I'm playing, when I'm playing with the band, and how my contemplative practice was helping me during that weekend. And so that's kind of how these things started to come together and fuel this new, this coming back to prose writing. Yeah.
Right, and it kind of began as blog posts, right, for bliss and drumming. So that's really cool, and that they kind of started as like little pieces, right? And then you decided, what, let me put it into a memoir, let me combine it all together. Was that also a natural transition for you, or was there some planning involved in terms of how to organize it all? What was that process like? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, the blog pieces, I really was trying to explain to people how I started to see that, we think of meditation, we think of contemplative practice as something that we have to do, we sit in the same place every day on the meditation mat, and we kind of ding the little bell, and then we're silent, and then we get up and we go out into our world. And I don't I could see that people didn't weren't really putting a lot of the pieces together of how that practice in the morning helps you throughout the day. And I thought, I have this really great, a lot of great examples of how I deal with challenge, and how that inner world of meditation comes back to help me throughout the day, even when I'm dealing with all of this crazy rock and roll stuff. And so at first I felt it to be almost, I don't want to say instructional, but just kind of like showing people the benefits of meditation and contemplative practice. That was my first, I think, impetus to be writing about this stuff. Um, when I decided to put the book together, I thought, it was during the pandemic, and I thought, okay, well, this is great. I have all these blog pieces. I'll just put them together, and that'll be a book. And as I did that, I realized, wait a minute, like, to write a book, you have to do more than just put these old pieces together. I have to really kind of create an arc of story, for the book, and realize, oh, there's a lot more writing I have to do. And so that took a while to try to figure out how all of these little pieces that I had written kind of went into a bigger arc to make a book. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, it sounds like you had your audience in mind and I mean, purpose in mind as you're planning it all together. You wanted to teach others and get that message across. So, what the most challenging part of being so vulnerable about your spiritual struggles and attachments while also conveying those lessons that you mentioned?
Yeah, that vulnerability, I think it comes, over years of meditation. What we're really doing is we're sitting in silence, and we're observing our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and we're watching how we react to these things. And over time, we develop a real compassion for the things that we're dealing with. When I first started to really hear my thoughts, in a silent meditation, 10-day silent meditation retreat that I did. And I realized that most of my thoughts were judgments about myself, and really negative thoughts about myself. I realized, I started to feel this kind of compassion for Clem, who had been walking around with this negativity, kind of bombarding her constantly. And a lot of my spiritual practice was trying to figure out, why did I have all of this negativity within myself? Why did I have so much judgment about myself? Now, I think that a lot of creative people struggle with that. And I think a lot of creativity comes out of that dialogue with ourself, this battle with ourselves to get over that negativity that says we're not worthy, we're not good enough, we don't have anything to say. All of those things that go into creative blocks, are those negative voices that come up for people. And so for years, I had been examining those things. And when I was putting the book together, I was looking back through old pieces that I had written that I had never published in the blog. And this piece came up, and when I had written it, it was a very personal feeling about the way I felt about my body, my physicality. And at the time I wrote it, and it felt so honest that I actually put a password on it in my
Oh,
computer. Like, I don't want anybody to ever read this,
I
right?
get that.
Because it's
We all
so
been there.
honest. Yeah, right. But when I was looking at I looked at it for the book, and I realized that actually it was a really important aspect of what I had been dealing with for a really long time, and what I had kind of overcome. And I decided to put it in the book. And to me, putting that in the book was this big mark of how far I had come to let go of believing that negative stuff within myself. And so, when we talk about vulnerability, especially as writers, that is the writer's voice, is to be able to step right into our fear, step right into our vulnerability.
Mm,
And I think that's where we find our true voice, when we are not hiding anything. There's a big aspect of spiritual practice, to get to let go of the mask of personality, the mask that we present to the world that hides all of our fears and vulnerabilities, and to really to live truthfully, to live honestly and in integrity is to gradually let go of those masks that we hold up against, because then we can really truly be empathetic and really love and really care about the other person, and that goes for ourselves as well. So I think that was a big lesson for me in putting the book together is was stepping into that kind of vulnerability that and noting like, wow, I've come a really long way from the girl who was terrified to really write what she felt. I think that's why I put writing down in my 20s because I wasn't strong enough to really confront a lot of those fears. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's just so funny that you went from locking it all up literally to spreading it for the world to see, you know.
Mhm.
So it's just a fun transition in that regard. But yeah, I could see how that whole process helped you find your voice. And it does show because it makes your writing very poetic, very beautiful too. I mean, my favorite line when I was looking through it myself was honeysuckle rolling onto I mean, you just do a nice job of putting things together. So
Mm.
I'm wondering, how does that voice come to be? It must be a part of just developing it throughout writing all those different blogs and practice. Do you have any tips for other authors who might want to kind of emulate that style? What's your process for that?
Yeah, I think that I think that that quiet time where we're just we're observing our sensations, observing how how our mind is working, observing our reactions to the stimulus around us. I think that is the writer mind, and my favorite writers like Nabokov is wonderful at this, and I'm reading a lot of Henry, revisiting a lot of Henry Miller right now, and he was really wonderful at that. Is looking outwards, describing outwards, but then also being able to fall into the experience within the self as well. And I love writers that are constantly going out and in within. And I think that is where our voice is being able to hear as clearly as possible that natural fearless voice within ourselves. So I think contemplative practice, meditation, any kind of thing like that, even or just I know going for a long, quiet, silent walks. For a lot of writers is important. I think that cultivates that stillness, that quietness cultivates that ability to really tap into our deepest feelings and our deepest understanding about our relationship to ourselves and the world.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love that you describe it so beautifully like that because I think a lot of authors can benefit from hearing that. And we're all listening today and we're trying to find our own voice just as you have. And that's just a great way to go about it. So all this being said, you have the book out on the shelves, and it's been a great journey for you from what it seems. I'm wondering, what's next then? I know you have your practice. Are you thinking of producing some more books? What's on the agenda?
Yeah, so I've put out a couple of record albums this year with songs that I've written and sung and created. So songwriting is a kind of a constant in my life. I have a couple of books that are kind of percolating in the back of my mind, and it's funny because one of them, like there's a little bit of fear around writing it, and so I'm really kind of exploring that a little bit. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm really happy to always be writing and kind of. I feel like I'm in that place because I put out the book, I put out these two records, and now I'm kind of in that taking in place. Where I'm kind of waiting for things to start to percolate. So there's all this little popcorn going on in the back of my head. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, well, being that you originally locked away your thoughts for this first book, and now you're a little bit,
It's fearful of, and the second one, I guess, is kind of like a little bit of a pattern. Then the process of realizing when it's time to release it.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
So that being said, I'm wondering, if how can people get in touch, and how can people, if they're interested in learning a little bit more about you or staying up to date with the new book, what's the best method to get connected?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is clemthegreat.com, and that has everything that I do on there, links to the different websites and projects. My book is on Audible. I read it as an audiobook, and then it's also on Amazon. So.
Perfect. Well, everybody, we're going to
Mhm.
put the links in the description box of this podcast today, but we're not quite done yet because I would love for us to dive into some more writing tips here for the authors. So I'm curious to know then if you happen to have any writing tips that the audience today could learn from that you wish you knew when you first got started. What is the best piece of advice you might be able to give? What do you think?
Oh gosh, the best piece of advice. Well, I'm a big fan of just kind of finding time to sit in places, whether it's restaurants or cafes or, even just going for walks, walking down the street, and just kind of free form jotting things down. I think movement is really helpful for me, if I'm out in the world, traveling or waiting for people in a restaurant or something, have so many napkins of notes, right? I love
Mhm.
jotting stuff down. I also do this thing occasionally where the first time, I love the idea of the morning pages, right? From The Artist's Way, the book The Artist's Way, where she suggests waking up every morning and handwriting 3 pages of just, a free form stream of consciousness writing. Something that I like to do as well, and I do this for songwriting, but it also does trigger something, is that I sit down with my computer in the morning in kind of the dark when I wake up and just close my eyes. I just grab the computer and I just start free form, not even complete sentences, but just phrases and just allow, like, find that place within me where words and images just come up, and I'm typing so quickly that I'm really not in it. It's almost like automatic writing. And I think that it's like turning a tap on or something in my head. I find that really helpful for songwriting because I'll look back and I'll have 2 pages of these little phrases all the way down, and I'll say, oh, that phrase is really interesting. Sometimes they're words that don't usually go together or things like that. Um, and then, just consistency, finding a time every day to do it, to write, whether it's in little pieces and starts and stops here and there, or whether it's a consistent, I'm sitting down for 2 hours. It's important to keep the tap running, right?
Half running, yes.
Yeah.
Um, I like that metaphor. It's a beautiful metaphor. You've actually with a couple of really great ones during this show. I mean, let's all turn on those taps of water and we sit down and write our books, right? But also, I loved that the locking away metaphor too, and all of that also. So great, great, great stuff that we have here. So yeah, Kira, this has been an amazing episode, Clementine. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us and talking a little bit more about your experiences. It's been a pleasure. Really,
Thank you so much. Thank you. Likewise.
of course. And, to our listeners, this is exactly why Authors on Mission exists, to show you that expertise and wisdom come in the most unexpected packages, sometimes proving that you don't have to choose between pursuing your passions and pursuing enlightenment. For her, it happened all together. So it's the exact same path. Thank you for joining us again. And to our listeners, if this conversation moved you, please go ahead and click on the links in the description box, get in touch and get connected with Clementine. Check out her book, check out the music too. And until next time, keep following your mission. Have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.